What are your tips for, first off, for somebody that might want to get out with their dog? How can they judge to see if the environment or the weather that day is safe for their dog? And then how can they make sure their dog is the most comfortable?
Sure. I think the heat more often is more of a problem for our dogs. Now, for those that might not know, our dogs really expel heat a couple of ways. They don't have sweat glands the way that we do. That sweat doesn't evaporate off their body and cool them off the way it does for humans. They expel heat through their paw pads. They expel heat through panting, through their ears. And so that's about it. And so they can get overheated very quickly. So you have to be mindful. So we always do our adventures in the morning when we do our adventure club on the weekends, when we do our pack hikes, for example, during the week, when we grab groups of dogs, we try and reserve those for the morning times. If it's too hot, and it's, variable by the dog, but really once you even get to 75, 80 degrees, you're starting to tick up and you have to take frequent breaks, frequent water breaks, give them a chance to slow down. And you really want to be careful to not push it. For a colder weather, again, it depends on the dog and the dog breeds. Certainly different breeds have different acclimations to the colder weather. And so seeing coats actually do have a place for certain dogs and certain dogs that do need it. But, a lot of our larger dogs, fluffier dogs, they're pretty comfortable. I will note too, and I know your background as well in grooming, but you don't want to shave your fluffy dogs down because that regulate their body.
That's a really important topic. We could do a whole nother episode on
Right. Yeah. So you're doing your dog a good service. Oh, I want to cool them off and shave them down. But in fact, that fluffy coat, that insulated coat actually helps keep them cool. It can be tough for dogs that swim, if you have like a water dog that's working fishing lines or something. But for the most part, your dogs are fine with in that longer coat, and it keeps them a little bit cooler. Like I said, keep them cool, try and keep near a water source if you're able to. We let them walk through the mud.
Yeah, it's an adventure. You should get muddy. And I like what you said about an adventure doesn't have to be, you don't have to go out and hike. You can do this in your neighborhood or even in your backyard. It's just that variety and that mindset. So when it is too hot out, like, hey, turn your living room into an adventure. Absolutely. Be creative,
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Now, do you have, I know we talked a little bit about prep and what to bring. So the obvious ones were the poop bags in the water. Yeah. Are there any strange items that you're out there and you thought to yourself, wow, I really wish I would have brought that?
So my backpack will have, like I said, I bring lots of jugs of water because you're going to go through a lot more of it for your dog than even for yourself. I usually use a collapsible water bowl. I bring treats because we're advisory person, don't know who you're going to run into. Extra things like extra carabiners, an extra leash, an extra harness, just in case things break. Again, I'm planning and preparing. I bring citronella spray. You don't know what you're going to encounter out there. Although now in Massachusetts, we are getting more bear. So if you are hiking in other places in bear country, you want to make sure you plan in that regard as well. And so, those are things that we certainly keep in mind when we're out there. And then first aid kit for both you and your dog. Wound wash and an antiseptic and that kind of thing.
Do you notice that the dogs need anything for their paw pads? Do you have any recommendations for that? Or do most of them just kind of acclimate?
That's a great question. And I'm not prepared to answer that thoroughly. They do make booties and different kinds. I think it's like wax type material for paws, particularly if you're going in, snowy areas or snow crust areas, like a lot of sled dog teams will use these kinds of things. The booties are great too on hot surfaces. If you happen to be on pavement, the basic rule of thumb as far as testing the pavement is holding your back of your hand to the pavement for about 5 seconds. If you can do it, it should be fine for your dog to walk on. If you can't, it's too hot and it's going to burn their paws. But same thing too in the winter. Like if you're in a neighborhood and you have salt on the ground to, snow melt, paw booties there are also really helpful to protect, from the chemicals that are in the salt. But when we're out in the woods, we haven't run into it too much to look for the paw protection. But depending on the environment that you're in, whether desert or snow or whatever, be mindful of that. But that's a great question. I think that's something that other folks can explore.
Yeah. And I guess it's very environmental dependent also. So it might be very different in different areas as well. Now, what about sports as far as related to what you do? So running with dogs through the woods. I just picture this being so much fun, but every time I try it, It's not fun for me.
Well, I'm a big
Or-
fan of a waist belt with your dog. So that's great. So you can go.
yeah.
There are a number of cool outdoor sports for your dogs. I do take my dogs running, not with my clients, although maybe that's a different venue. I think we can explore later. We haven't gotten that adventurous. We've gone on long, 8-mile, 10-mile hikes, but we haven't gone on the full run yet.
Well, 8 to 10 miles, that's quite the hike.
Not always. That's our very adventurous.
Yeah.
Very adventurous folks. Most of our stuff is around, but we've been doing water sports like stand-up paddleboarding. And then in the fall, we're going to be looking at the joring. I know there's different joring sports like joring, and the joring, it just means your dog is pulling you. So whether it's joring when you're running behind your dog, or joring on a bike, or joring on skis, which I don't ski. So you'll be taking my broken leg back to the end of that. But that's, again, different sport for different seasons. But like you said, you have to be mindful again. Water sports is really popular right now because it's hot and we want to keep our dogs cool.
The paddle boarding sounds really fun. I bet people and dogs love that.
My dog does not like it all that much.
Oh, but they have to pick their own sports and their own activities. Every dog is different.
She does, but we are working on it and she has made great progress. And that's, again, pushing her a little bit outside of her comfort zone, but not flooding her. And when she wants to check out, we check out. When she's had enough, that's it. But we're working our classic counter conditioning methods and associating the scary thing with food. And I always joke that, I have an emotional math. So if scary things equal treats and then treats equal feeling good, then scary things are going to equal feeling good. So that's what we're working on. It's slow, but she's getting it. But that's where your foundational stuff really comes into play. And I know the work that you do, Melissa, with any of the trick things or any of the,
the tricks and the climbing on things.
All the obstacle course stuff, right? Building that proprioception, those tiny muscles that help your dog feel like they're balanced and handle it. All of that is really great and all the foundational work. So it's like, I'm a musician. So you have to learn your scales before you can play a song.
Makes a lot of sense.